For a closer look at the disputes and relationships in the South China Sea, I'm joined by Sourabh Gupta. He's an international relations policy specialist at the Institute for China-American Studies. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Elaine.
First, your thoughts on the incoming U.S. administration's attitude toward the South China Sea, especially Tillerson's most recent comments, especially as he or if he becomes Secretary of State.
It was very disappointing to hear what he had to say today, yesterday at the hearing. It was disappointing from the point of view because these were part of it were in his prepared remarks. We're not talking in terms of Q&A. Prepared remarks means he was briefed, probably by the State Department on this. This is not the State Department's position on China's territorial claims in the South China Sea. The State Department does not take a position on those claims. And secondly, actually, it was US policy initially which had seen that the strongest claim holder in the South China Sea to those land features was China. So there has been a lot of erratic statements which have come mostly from Mr. Trump, but I am seeing an erratic statement coming from the nominee who has a reputation for being a very senior corporate leader and knows how to speak from his brief, and so this is rather scary.
Is that an indication of where we could see things go if this continues?
I wouldn't go that far, simply from the point of view that he will understand the gravity of the situation, and he will also hear from allies on this issue. There will be obviously discussions with China, and they will be very, very firm with Secretary Tillerson as to what the U.S. position is and what the U.S. can and should not do in the South China Sea. And so I actually see that at some point of time the two parties can have some sort of a modus operandi where there is a certain equilibrium and things don't spiral out of control. But in the interim period, I see a lot of scope for anxiety, insecurity, and miscalculation.
Let's look at the region. A key Vietnamese political leader is in Beijing right now, meeting with President Xi Jinping, and looks like there's been some good discussions regarding the South China Sea. What do you make of this headway between a regional neighbor in the South China Sea and a claimant?
Oh, this is very optimistic, very promising. And from the point of view, not just the Vietnamese, but also with regard to China-Philippines relations, China-Malaysia relations, all in the past 6 months, post the verdict, the arbitration verdict in The Hague. And here's the important point. A lot of people thought that once the verdict went against China, things would spiral downwards and deteriorate. In fact, for China and most of the ASEAN countries, the verdict was the closing of a chapter, not the ending of a chapter, and the beginning of a new chapter when they could again move forward on their relations. And they've made tremendous steps forward, and there are important steps that all parties need to take going forward.
So with this regional cooperation, why does another country on the other side of the world have to get involved?
That's a question I think the Americans should be answering, and I'm not exactly clear. I understand that they have freedom of navigation related concerns in the South China Sea. Those are valid concerns. But the fact of the matter is that navigation in the South China Sea is no different. The status on navigation is no different in 2016 as it was in 2002. All the regional claimants have a similar position with regard to military activities and navigation in the exclusive economic zones in the South China Sea. Nothing has changed in this interim period, and I don't see why there's the need to harp so much on navigation when navigation really has not been denied, or the status quo has not, or the situation on navigation has not changed, even though the status quo in terms of the land reclamations is obviously at a different place.
All right, Sourabh Gupta, we appreciate your perspective, your insight. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're most welcome.